Ready to embrace the magical side of life, where anything is possible and the infinite is accessible to all? Let's have a conscious conversation about what's going on in the world, in your life, and your relationship from the expanded perspective of your soul. The path to awareness begins and ends in the heart. So let's take it there, one step at a time, and learn to cultivate magic in your life every single day. In each episode, we share a collective space in which we discover the unique facets of our own magic and embody our superhuman qualities by humbly exploring how it's super simply to be human. Hosts Kaí and Dell co-create a magical experience to remind you that you are magical as fuck. Now, be unleashed. This is our daily magic.
Okay, there we go. This time we got it. Remember that one time we were doing this, it was like, well, that's how other people seen us, but we didn't know we were muted. All right, let's get this started. So, welcome everyone to another exciting episode of our Daily Magic podcast. This is, I believe, episode 62, I believe, of this one. We've been really being consistent with this for the past year, and it's very exciting because every conversation is magical in its own unique way. Just like whoever's listening to this, you are also magical in your own unique way. And our intention with this is to have conversations in which you get to see other magical beings showcasing their magic and show you the possibilities of how you can be able to integrate more into your life, more magic, more of you. So I am one of the co-hosts, Dell, and this is my lovely wife,
Kaí. And I have the pleasure of introducing our guest. Did you want to do announcements first?
Yeah.
All right. Let's do that first.
Yeah, there's some quick announcements. Just wanted to just let people know about other things we have going on. Besides this podcast as well, we do have a couple of things going on this week. So tomorrow in our conscious relationship group that we have, in which we made a post with, we're going to be doing a topic and a conversation and a live interactive Q&A on the topic is how insecurities can affect your relationships. So we're going to have a conversation in which we're going to be talking about how our insecurities showed up in relationships and how we were able to overcome it as well and answer other people's questions. That was definitely something that some people in the group definitely mentioned some stuff they would like to work on. So we're definitely going to do that one. And then on Friday in this group right here, we have our live conversation with celebrity influencer Rashidat with the Raw Truth. I don't even know what number it is, but that's another conversation going on. Just a couple of things. And of course, with this conversation and this podcast moving forward, if you like it, please like it on iTunes. Help us to get more algorithms, get more in front of people. If you're watching on YouTube, leave some comments, some suggestions, and obviously you're here live, interact with us. It's something that grabs your attention from this, and I'm sure that it will. Put your questions in it, put the input you're getting from this, and from our conversation that I walked into that was going on before this. Strap up. It's going to be a great conversation. And with that said, Kaí with the introduction.
Absolutely. It is my honor to introduce Kelly, who is a board-certified hypnotist. She's a hypnosis instructor for basic and advanced training, a writer, and a lecturer on healing the shadow of the soul and reconnecting to our divine selves. Kelly is trained in holistic psychology, parts healing and integration, age regression, that's really interesting, part math, past life regression, lives between lives spiritual healing, and Ho'oponopono. Kelly is the author of the published books The Voiceless Soul and Healing Our Unhealed Parts, and has published articles with naturalnews.com, psychcentral.com, wakeupworld.com, elephant journal, and preventdisease.com. A celebrity in her own right. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you so much, Kaí and Dell, and thank you to all your guests that are here.
It's really an honor to have you. And yeah, we got right into the conversation, right before we got on, talking about some of the ways that, that you recommend people to really integrate their trauma and their healing.
Yeah, and what I was mentioning is because I wrote that book on parts therapy, parts healing our unhealed parts. And what that means is that we have different parts of ourselves. Some of them are not healed because they're stuck in trauma. And what happens is when you have a trauma, any kind of trauma, emotional trauma, even if it's a physical trauma, there's going to be an emotion attached to that, some kind of fear emotion attached to that. And that's usually in childhood. And what happens is that part of us, that trauma, we become frozen cognitively at that time. We lose all conscious thought about what's happening and we go straight into survival mode because we start to fear what's happening around us because we don't understand. We're just too young. So it couldn't be integrated at the time. And because we couldn't integrate the trauma at the time, it basically becomes frozen. And I call that like a frozen imprint on the soul. Because what happens is now it's frozen, but it's frozen at the level of consciousness when the trauma happened. So if you have a trauma at the age of 5 that you couldn't integrate because you did not understand what was happening, you basically went into a fear response and froze. Your body basically shuddered. That imprint is at the level of a 5-year-old consciousness. So when you get older and the rest of you grows up, you still have an imprint of consciousness of a 5-year-old, which means your reactive behavior is coming from that imprint. Because an adult would not have that type of reactive behavior. It comes from something that's unconscious, but it comes from that level of consciousness. So when people act out, they stamp their feet, they yell. It's all coming from somebody who has repressed anger or somebody who has some kind of frozen imprint that they never fully integrated. So my work entails bringing forward the parts of you that are suppressed and repressed. Suppressed is like we basically shut it down. We knew we shut it down. We suppressed it and we moved on from it. We believe we did. Repressed is where it gets so deeply suppressed deep into our soul, and then it becomes protected by the ego, and the ego will not even let you near it and won't even let a therapist or someone that's here to help you heal it near this part of you because it's protecting the wound. It's protecting this fragile part of you. The ego wants to protect it because it doesn't want you to bring this fragile part forward because this part of you basically feels inferior, and the ego can never feel inferior. That's a survival response. The ego is about survival, right? So healing our unhealed parts is bringing these frozen traumas forward and bringing in your divine self, your wise self that did grow up and become into their higher understanding of life. They have more experience about life. They understand life more. They have to bring this understanding in a very delicate way to this frozen trauma. Otherwise, this frozen trauma will not open up. So it's fragile, it's scared, it's hiding, it's repressed. If you come at it through talk therapy, it's so hidden and so repressed, it's not even going to show up. What's going to show up is all the reactive behavior around it, but not the core wound. So the reason I do hypnosis is to get you out of the ego state, relax that part of your mind that wants to analyze it, overprotect it, and basically avoid it. And when you do that and you get somebody into a trance and you direct them to go to the part of them that's feeling or causing their reaction or holding them back from their greatness, and we say, bring that part forward, all of a sudden that part comes forward very quickly, because you block the ego, you relax the ego, you relax the analytical mind. So I get a lot of clients that say they've been in therapy for 10 years, 15 years. But when in one session, something's coming up that didn't come up in 15 years. It's not the therapist's fault. It's because there's limitations in getting to these fragile parts of us. And it's the same thing, age regression. Age regression is going back to that initial source that is frozen in time. It's a part of you that you basically continue to reject yourself because you felt the world was rejecting it in you. So an example of that would be something simple. I won't get complicated, but something simple could be just a child, and you're coloring flowers, and suddenly an authoritative figure like a mother or father, somebody you look up to that you want to impress, you want to please, and you show it to them, and they say, okay, well, let me know when you can color inside the lines. Okay. So now all of a sudden to you, that's an emotional trauma. Okay, I was not accepted for my artwork, but yet there's a gift in you that's drawn to art. So when you get older, you now repress a gift because you froze in time that this is just not good enough to be acceptable. So you'll never feel your work is good enough. So you may dabble in it, but you'll never really put it out there. So it's the same thing, writing a book. I wrote my book, but it took me a long time to finally say, you know what, I'm just going to put it out there. I'm going to take that chance, that leap of faith, because I was locked in that it's never going to be good enough. It's never going to be good enough. And then I had to look at the way I talk to my clients, the way I do my own work, and say to myself, you know what, what's the worst that could happen, right? You put out a book. People are going to say they like it because they're your friend, but you know what? You're going to put it out there anyway. And I did, and I'm happy I did because I'm getting a lot of great feedback on it. So the name of that book is The Voiceless Soul. Okay, and who is the Voiceless Soul? The Voiceless Soul is ourselves, our whole selves, during a time that we couldn't voice what we were feeling. That could be our time in the womb, young childhood before we could speak the words, or when we didn't know the words, or when we shut down and froze in trauma, which could be the death of an animal, the death of someone close to you. Even as a teenager, something devastating could happen and you basically shut down. You lose your voice, right? So the voiceless soul is the imprint on the soul that was never voiced. So in this book, I actually have cases in this book of taking people back to their time in the womb and their time in the early childhood at birth. Okay, I have recordings of people going back to their birth, being in trauma, that didn't like coming into the world, or they didn't like how they felt when they entered the world. A lot of them flinch, their eyes flinch, even their eyes are closed, they flinch. And I say, what's happening? And they say, it's too bright in here, or it's so cold, or it's very noisy. This is a newborn feeling this, but did not have the words, right? So what's happening in that moment is the wise adult self is interpreting the feelings in the soul of this newborn. When they're in the womb, I get responses like, how are you feeling? And they'll say, I don't feel good. And I'll say, what's happening? I feel very sad. And I say, well, what's making you feel sad? And they'll actually say, mother is sad. I said, how come mother's sad? Because mother doesn't want another child. And I'll say, what makes you believe mother doesn't want another child? And you'll say, because they're just burdened with too many children. Now, it's interesting because afterwards I'll ask my client, is this your feeling as an adult? And they'll say no, but I think it was my feeling growing up because they didn't get the attention they needed because there were just too many children, and they were kind of all vying for a mother's attention or father's attention. And there were 5 children, 6 children, some come from a family of 12, and they really don't get the attention that they need as a child. And it's not the parents' fault, but the child is actually interpreting that I'm not lovable, or mother has no time for me, or mother didn't want me. Okay. But those feelings can actually come from mother and be picked up by the child while they're in the womb, with mother's feeling of overwhelmed. How can I care for another child, right? Now the child picks up that energy and interprets that energy. So it might not be the exact thoughts of mother, but it's in the basically the same vibration of mother. It's a low vibration. It's a fear vibration. Now the child in the womb is picking it up, and they're expressing that from the womb. So it's at womb, it's at birth, and it's very early childhood that most of my clients will go back to, when we're going back to when they first felt what they were feeling when they came into my office. And not only are they healing these parts of them, and we're doing that deep forgiveness work, higher understanding work, that, you were here, you're a gift from God. That's why you're here. And yes, mother did want you. That's why she's giving birth to you. Yes, she is a little overwhelmed. She is in fear because she wants to give you the love you deserve, but she's concerned. So what we're really doing is we're flipping the perception of the child, where the child consciousness that's frozen in time as a child is thinking, I'm not really wanted by mother. So while they're in hypnosis, we bring in mother's energy and we say, let's find out from mother what was causing her fear. And then we have the child part talk to the mother's energy. So it's really basically soul to soul conversation. Because when I'm doing that deep hypnosis work, they're out of the ego, and a lot of them are really in their spirit body, because I'm guiding them basically out of their body, so that they can be only in their soul energy, because everything comes from that voiceless soul. So now child and mother are actually having a soul to soul conversation, and I'm facilitating that conversation. So when I say call in mother's energy, just tell me when mother's with you, nod your head, they'll go like this, and I'll say, okay, let's tap into her energy. What's mother feeling? She's very sad, very overwhelmed. Okay. Let mother speak through you. So I'm talking to my client now. Let mother speak through you. What's causing your overwhelm, mother? Now the person in my chair is saying, it's just so much work. I don't know how I'm going to do it all. I really love this child. I'm so happy. This is my new baby. I just want to be able to give her the attention, but I'm so overwhelmed. So now what's happening, because mother's coming from her soul, she's telling the truth. No mother is going to give birth and say, I don't want this child. If they're coming from their truth, their divine self, they're going to talk from their divine self. It's only the ego that might say, I don't want this child. That's a fear response. But by nature, mother does love that child. So I'm not worried about what mother's going to say. So it's always something that's going to change the perception of the person in my chair. So now we've changed the perception of that child in the womb, or the child that was just born. We change perception. It changes the perception of the adult, because it's still the same consciousness. It was just a frozen imprint in my client's soul. So does that all make sense?
Absolutely.
Right. So my book is about understanding how we actually pick up on the vibrational energy of those around us, beginning from the time of the womb. Okay. I can never really confirm it goes back to conception, but most of my clients, when I ask them, what trimester they're in, they're usually in the 2nd or 3rd trimester when they're speaking from the womb. Very rarely do they say they're in the 1st trimester. In my book, there's a case about one girl that got stuck in the birth canal. And she actually started hyperventilating in my chair because she went back in time. She was reliving the time that she got stuck in the birth canal. And I found out later, well, she did, and she reported it back to me, that she was born blue and they had to give her oxygen right away.
Was this during the birth? Was this during birth, or was it during the 1st trimester?
It was during birth. She got stuck in she was being born, but she got stuck. Okay. And they were having a hard time getting her out of the birth canal. but she came to me because she was having severe anxiety. And I always ask my clients, where do they feel that in their body? Because sometimes I regress them back in time based on that part of their body. And sometimes I regress them back based on the words that they use. So sometimes I'll say, focus on the energy around this area where you're feeling the anxiety. Let it get really intense. Let's go back in time and locate the source of it. And I go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Be there now. Where are you? Right? And next thing you know, this girl, she started screaming. She goes, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And I said, where are you? She says, I don't know. I said, are you in the womb? She says, I don't think so. I said, are you born? She says, no. And that's what it hit me. I said, oh, I think she's stuck. Right?
Wow.
So the reason she had anxiety around here is because she was crunched up and she couldn't breathe because her neck was down like that. So she was all blocked off from breathing. So she was born blue and they had to give her oxygen. So, you know, and then after we did that, she no longer had that energy around here, because what I did is I went through the whole birth with her. I said, okay, come on, you're going through it. You're going through it. You're okay. Come on, you can go through it. Then after she took a big breath. I said, okay, you're out of the womb. I go, what's happening now? She goes, I don't think I could breathe. I'm turning blue. I'm turning blue. And I'm rubbing her face and I'm rubbing her forehead. I said, okay, you're coming back. You're coming back. Your color's coming back. And it took quite a while. It was very stressful for both of us, I got to tell you. But it really worked out well, and it really did get rid of her anxiety. But that's a frozen trauma, which is somatic. It's in the body. Okay. So, and also the emotions of it. The emotions are, I'm going to die. And at that age, we do have survival mechanisms. Our reptilian brain is the first part of the brain to develop in the womb. Is the reptilian part of the brain. It's our survival. Children know how to survive in the womb. They try to survive in the womb. By nature, they do. And that's why the first part of our brain is going to be the survival brain, to keep us in survival. And then it starts working its way up, the emotional brain and then the cognitive brain. And even after, it takes a good 3 years after birth for that full cognitive brain to fully develop. But, and it's very interesting because I do talk a lot about survival, because people don't understand that a child could fall down the stairs when they're 5 years old and suppress that trauma, because that was a trauma of, I'm going to die. And that is so traumatic. Even though they may realize they're okay later, at that moment, while they're tumbling or when they first fall and nobody's there right away to catch them, whatever, they go into a suppressed trauma of, I'm dying. Okay. If that becomes frozen in time, what happens is there's a part of them that's frozen that remains active. Okay. And can be reactivated at any time, that they could see stairs and start to hyperventilate, and they don't know why, because they suppressed it. So you could talk to somebody for years saying, I don't know, for some reason around staircases, I hold on really tight and I go down really slow, and I don't know why. When I look down, I just kind of get dizzy, whatever they say. But if I regress them back to the cause, they might find themselves as a 5-year-old tumbling down the stairs. At that point, while they're in hypnosis, I have to bring in their adult self to prove to their 5-year-old consciousness, you made it, you survived it, you're alive, it's over. Because in their unconscious, it's still happening. We have to get it from the unconscious, we have to bring it conscious to explain to them, you are alive. You're not still there, because it got frozen while it was happening. So in their frozen trauma, it's still happening. They're waiting to die. So when they see the stairs, that gets reactivated and they start getting nauseous, dizzy, because the fear is coming up that they're about to die. So it's the same thing when you're working with anxiety. It's the same thing when you're working with any kind of stress response that people have. So when people come to me and tell me they have panic attacks out of nowhere and they don't know where it came from, I love clients like that, because I know I'm going to find it. I know I'm going to find it. I know their panic attacks are going to stop. They're having panic attacks because something is still active in their unconscious mind, but we don't have access to it. So how are we going to figure out what's causing that fear, right? What's causing the panic? You know, so once you walk them through it and show them that they're safe, they're alive, or they might be in a panic attack because they saw a car accident and did see somebody die. Okay. So they became frozen in time because right away they think that could have been me, that could have been my loved one. But just to see or to witness some kind of severe trauma like that could be a trauma for the person witnessing it. Okay. And then they start to panic that it could happen to them one day. So they become fearful of crossing the street or fearful of driving, fearful of whatever, right? Because they saw a trauma. So that could cause a panic attack. So it's not always happening to the person, but it is a perception that they're not safe. So you always have to go back to the root cause. And if they did witness a death to somebody, I cross them over to the other side through their spirit body, and I bring in that person that crossed over, and they have their closure. Wow. You know, whether they need to have a conversation, whether they need to have forgiveness. Okay. I talk a lot about forgiveness in my book because I think a lot of people are forgiving on a superficial level, and that's why they're really not healing, because we forgive because we believe that we're supposed to give. We have to forgive. We just have to do it. It's good for us. It helps us move on. But you have to understand that there's a part of us that really doesn't want to forgive, because when something we believe was done onto us that was so cruel, so mean, we don't want to forgive, because a part of us likes to continue to either control that, all right, or part of us feels like we've given them a free pass. So I always tell people you have to forgive on a deep level. And the only way to do that is to bring in compassion. Compassion for yourself and compassion for the person that hurt you. I'll tell you why. For them to do what they did, whatever it was, for you to believe that they actually had a consciousness that would hurt you, what was going on in that consciousness? That means there's a part of them, okay, that's not living in their divine self. There's a part of them that's disconnected from their divinity. So somewhere they're already struggling. Okay. So have compassion for that part of them, but also have compassion for yourself. And you really don't have to forgive them. Forgive yourself for forgetting your value at that moment. You forgot your value because you saw that they had that power over you, that they were able to hurt you. Look at it like I have compassion for you. You didn't do better because you didn't know better. But I'm going to have compassion and forgiveness for myself for forgetting that I have value and I have my own power and divinity, and I don't want to give it to you. And I did. So I forgive myself for that. I forgive myself for forgetting who I was. Because we do that. And the moment that we let somebody hurt us, we forgot who we are, right? We took on their energy. We took on what they projected onto us. And the moment we did that, the moment we felt less than because they made us feel less than, we totally forgot our value. Let them take some of our value from us. So we have to forgive ourselves for that. And then we could basically forgive them for not knowing how to be a better person, or forgive them for not doing better. Okay? Because they were limited in their ability to life. They were limited in their ability to be a better person. And you got to say, what's the bigger picture here? What was life like for them growing up? Why are they doing what they do? It's really coming from projected energy. Parts of them they don't like within themselves, they're trying to project out. They're basically trying to get out of themselves because it's very uncomfortable in them. And that's where people project out their anger, project out their own fears, project out their own hidden shadow parts, right? So something they don't like in themselves, they project onto you as if they don't like it in you. But they're really saying there's a part of me I don't like about myself. I don't like it. I'm going to project it out on you, right? So what are you doing, though? You're just triggering them. But if they triggered you, what's going on in you? Where did you forget who you are? Where did they forget who they are? Because if we want to look at it collectively, we're all divine beings. But if we have a disconnect with ourselves, our true selves, our divine selves, we may end up hurting others. Right? So we got to look at it that way. Somebody forgot who they are in this world. Somebody forgot their value. And now they have triggered me, And now I must have forgotten my value. So it's really self-forgiveness. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a question now. A question right on to the word trigger.
Yeah.
Because I see that a lot.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of words: trigger, toxic. What's another one? Narcissism, and like all these other stuff. And what people are projecting, saying this person's this way, this person's toxic, or this person's triggering me or upsetting me. It's your fault you're upsetting me, or this person's narcissistic, and whatever it may be. What are your thoughts on when people actually are labeling people based upon like those type of stuff? And also, what does trigger mean for you?
Well, trigger is they're triggering something in you that's unhealed. So something in them has triggered in you something you need to heal. Okay. Because at that moment they triggered you, you forgot your value, right? Now, as far as narcissism goes, yeah, you can call somebody narcissist, but only if you understand what you mean by that. It doesn't mean they're a bad soul. There are no bad souls. Okay. There's people that do bad things. There's people that do wrong, but there's no bad souls. What there are damaged souls. A narcissist is usually somebody who's been neglected. Okay. And as a neglected child, they decided no one's ever going to take care of them. So they say, it's all on me. I take care of myself. And they become selfish. And that's really what narcissism is. It's real selfishness. Everything becomes about the narcissist. What's good for them? What's in it for me? What's in it for me? And the reason they become selfish is because when they were younger, they were neglected. Nobody paid attention to them. Nobody showed them that they were valuable or belonging or they were worthy. And as a protection, they decided that they were going to be selfish, that they were going to take care of themselves. And they will do it at any cost, even if it means hurting somebody else, that they will get their needs met somehow. Does that make sense? There's your narcissism, okay? But if you're going to label somebody as a narcissist, understand what you're talking about. You're talking about a damaged soul. So when you say it, don't say it with judgment. Just say this is their experience and it created what we're labeling narcissists. But if you want to get away from the labels, just say, obviously that person is struggling with emotions inside. All right. So it's probably best if we don't label them or say you are this and you are doing this to me, because now what you did is say you triggered me. You did it to me. You're blaming them like they have power over you. You forgot your value, right? If you're blaming somebody also, you're giving them the responsibility to correct it, which means you got to wait now till they can better themselves for you to be okay with yourself, right? So what you really want to do is just say, really, this person is struggling. I'm going to pray for them. And if we could get to that point, we are totally tapping into our divinity. When we're not at that point, there's a part of us that forgot our divinity. Because we're judging now and we're using blame to take responsibility off of us. If they triggered us, the responsibility is on us. Whew. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, with my training in holistic psychology, we work with the mind, the body, the spirit. All right. I see the soul and spirit, the same thing, but you're not really in your spirit until you live from an unburdened soul, because the soul is pure. It's pure light, right? But it's burdened with the human experience. So when you come into the world, you're coming into a world and you're being taught by grown-ups that didn't actually grow up, because they have imprints of consciousness from their childhood, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in a lot in my book, I say, how grown up are the grown-ups in your life? Right? That's one of the chapters. And it's like, you really have to understand the bigger picture. So, and I look at my own parents, which I describe in the book. My mom grew up not feeling loved by her mom. Okay. So she had suppressed emotions of not being lovable. which did what? It caused her to marry somebody like my dad, who didn't love himself, right? So then what happens is they have 5 children, me and my 4 siblings. And what happens from there? We grow up in a dysfunctional home. And the beat goes on, right? Because we now feel unlovable because we're in a dysfunctional home. So I talk a lot about generational trauma, how we get caught up in this trap of unworthiness because we're not healing those energetic imprints from that were really passed on to us, but not on purpose. It was unknowingly. It's coming from the unconscious. And what a lot of people don't know is that our daily behavior, 10% is influenced by what comes from the conscious mind, and 90% is influenced from what comes from the unconscious or the subconscious, however you want to label it. If you label it in 3 levels, you have the conscious mind, which is where we're at now. It's our analytical mind, it's our thinking mind, it's our critical mind, it's where our ego lives, and it's our short-term memories. What's subconscious is what's right below the surface there. That's a little bit accessible, okay, if you really dig into your memories. But what's unconscious would be ancestral memories, past life memories, memories that have been repressed, or memories from the womb in very early childhood, pre-verbal. Those are usually repressed, okay? So a talk therapist could probably get to your subconscious memories because they'll trigger them and they'll come out. But those repressed memories are protected by the ego. The ego blocks access to these parts of you for 2 reasons. I don't want you showing up fragile and make you weak in the world, and you have to be strong, and you have to put on a facade that you have it all together, right? Otherwise, people are going to judge you. And we don't want to be judged. We don't want to be rejected. And we want to be liked and we want to belong. So that's the ego's job. And it does a good job, right? But what the ego also does is it blocks access to the unconscious, to those repressed memories. So when you get somebody in a trance state and you relax the ego and you relax the analytical mind, they don't think about what I'm asking. It just comes up from the unconscious. I trigger the unconscious and I go right to the memories. And I do that by the words they're using, which is called the linguistic bridge. What language are they using? I use that same language. Like if they come to me and say, if they say it more than twice to me, I write it down. That's a red flag. I use that language. Okay. And that's how I get to the core wounds. Or I'll say to them, where do you hold it in the body? Which means a somatic bridge. And I'll go back somatically. Or we have a thing called the affect bridge, and I go back what they're feeling. So if they say, I just feel a panic attack all the time, I'll just say, go back to the first time you felt that panic attack. And next thing you know, they're 7 years old and mom and dad are screaming at each other and they're hiding in their room under their bed, holding their ears like this. And I say, what's happening? And they say, mom and dad are yelling. And I say, well, what are you feeling? And they either say, I feel like it's my fault. And then you have to, at that point, like I said before, we bring in mom, then we bring in dad, so that this child understands that parents do fight, they do have disagreements, and that it's not the child's fault. We have to get it. What we're really doing is we're not worried about what mom and dad are feeling the other person. We just want to change the perception of my client because they're the ones that need to change the perception. We can't do that for anybody else, right? I can't change anybody's perception if it's unconscious, all right? Because when parents are screaming at each other, what's really happening? That's their child parts coming out for battle, right? Because adults don't have to scream at each other. The wise self doesn't do that. The wise self will say, let's sit down and discuss this, because there will be disagreements. We're human. But if they're screaming at each other, they're throwing things at each other, they're really getting crazy, then chances are those are those child parts coming out that have been repressed and just got triggered, right? So it's all reactive behavior. Where's it coming from? Each person is feeling like the other one's not loving them. And that's the fear. The biggest fear in this world is the fear of non-love. That's ego fear. Okay? So when we get too much into the ego and we have the fear of non-love, okay, it's the same thing when you enter into a relationship. It may seem very loving at the beginning, but you always have that fear that you're going to lose it if you grew up with the fear of non-love, the fear of abandonment, the fear of rejection. It's like that frozen part of you is always waiting for that to happen. So you get easily triggered. So your spouse or your lover, whatever, is 10 minutes late. You start going, oh my God, they're with somebody else. I'm being rejected. All of these thoughts are coming up, right? Because there's a part of you that's still stuck in that frozen trauma. Okay? Because adults don't act like that. They would say, okay, they're 10 minutes late. When they get here, I'm going to ask them what happened. And, before I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, I'm not going to right away think things. But when you right away, your thoughts start going crazy, that's because you have trapped emotions, and the thoughts surrounding those emotions are coming forward. They start coming through mentally. And then the emotions are showing up in the body. You start shaking, you start sweating, you start getting crazy. And then all the thought forms are happening mentally. And then you just become a train wreck in that moment. So we want to avoid all that. So when people say they're not healing, or they say to me, I've been through every healing, I say, come to me. I want to work with you, and I don't guarantee anything, because we do have protector parts. Some of them could be very stubborn. It could take 3 or 4 sessions to break through that ego. If they really have a strong protector part, I tell them, if you have a strong protector part, I got to work with your protector part before I can get to your wounded part. And they'll be like, what do you mean? And I explain to them that I have to talk very politely and delicately to your protector part, because it's doing the job you asked it to do. And what I mean by that is, when we are in trauma, we're basically saying with our ego, I can't handle this. And our ego throws a protection on it and puts it into repression, because you couldn't handle it. You went straight into survival consciousness, which is our deepest fear. In a body, our deepest fear is survival. Out of the body, we're spirit, right? We know everything is love. We know everything is infinite, and we're divine, okay? So the idea here is to balance your divinity with the ego, because you're going to have to do that. As long as you're in a human body, that ego is part of that 3D construct, okay? So you balance it, because it's going to be there as long as you're in a body. You're still going to question survival, okay? And you should, because you're not going to walk in front of a bus and say, I'm spirit, nothing can happen to me, because you will get hit. So the idea is no, right?
You become full spirit real fast.
Yeah, exactly. So bring that ego in, okay? It's about common sense, right? That comes from ego. That comes from, analytical mind. You got to have it there. So you're not going to get rid of your 3D construct, but you can balance it. You cannot feed into the ego where it's not necessary, right? So when you're more in your divine self and understand the 3D construct, then you can live more from your divine self, your miracle self. I call it the miracle that you are in the book. And it's about bringing into balance and understanding the big picture around your life. If you're really disturbed by your background, or how you were brought up, or what a parent did or didn't do, or what a sibling did or didn't do, or who doesn't love you, and this and that, or you're too tall, too short, you got to tap into that, and you got to integrate this part of you back into the whole. Otherwise, it becomes a shadow part of you, a part you reject in yourself. And trust me, it will get triggered, which means you're never really feeling whole, because there's a part of you, which is a fragment of your soul, all right, that you haven't integrated into the whole self. It's basically what we call a split off. You rejected it, it splits off. Split offs live in the unconscious. Okay, so I talk through the book about our ancestral trauma. We have to understand the generational fear. We got to understand we're birthed into a world where people are already living the human consciousness of fear, because they watch the news. They have things that have happened to them through their life. They got childhood memories that are repressed. You're coming in, and these are the people that are influencing you. They're going to be projecting their stuff. And you're going to say, it must be me. Something must be wrong with me. But also, just so you know, as a survival response, as a young child, you have to make it about you. Because if you made it about the people caring for you, that would mean that something's wrong with them. If something's wrong with them and they're caring for you, what does that say about your safety? So for your own survival, you have to make it about you. And that's why growing up, it's no matter what anybody says or does, we flip it back on ourselves as long as we need that person's approval. If we need them to keep us safe, to care for us, to keep us alive, we cannot think there's something wrong with them. So if they are telling us we did something wrong or there's something wrong with us, we believe it. We'll never question it, okay? When you get older, you may intellectually understand, oh, they were just projecting on me, or they were going through something, or dad was overwhelmed with work, or mom was this. Yeah, we get it intellectually, but you still haven't addressed the childhood imprint that got frozen in time. It's frozen in the time and space of the event. Who's addressing that? And that's what my book discusses. We get into that voiceless part of you. So I teach you in the Voiceless Soul how to get yourself into your own trance state. So you're out of the ego. But when you do it, you have to hold into your mind what part of you needs to heal, or bring in the person that you're blaming for what you feel. Okay. Even if it means you're bringing in yourself because you feel you're not lovable and you're blaming yourself for that. So which means that there's a part of you that feels unlovable, and then there's the wise part of you. Okay. I teach them how to get themselves in their own trance state with self-hypnosis, using a heart math technique, but also how to write letters to the people that you're upset with, or to the part of you you're upset with, or the part of you you're disconnected from, or the people you're disconnected from. And you can start out your letter just expressing how you really feel. Like, I feel like you did this, and this hurt me. But I want people to write letters to say, when you did this, it made me feel. Okay? Instead of saying, I blame you, I blame you, I blame you, because now again, you're giving them the responsibility to change so that you can change. And it won't work, right? They may not be capable of change. So what you want to do is, when you did this, said this, or did not do this, it made me feel. Okay? You write your letters that way. But always close your letter with a higher understanding. But now I understand that when this happened, when I felt this, I was forgetting who I am. And I now realize, when you did this, you forgot your value. You weren't loving yourself, which made me believe you weren't loving me. So which means you're bringing in your divine self. So talk from your child part, but bring in your wise mind. Close the letter that way. So as I was explaining before the show, I don't agree with the get out all your anger and rip up the letter and say, got my closure, because you really didn't get your closure, because you're still placing the blame.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
To get closure, you have to see the bigger picture. You have to bring in that compassion for yourself and them. They are struggling. So don't stay angry at them. Don't look to punish them. They're already struggling. Trust me, they're struggling. They are disconnected. That's why they did or didn't do what you needed them to do. Forgive them, forgive yourself, have compassion for the human experience that the soul is going through, that they didn't understand, that took them away from their true divine self and put them in ego protective state. And that's exactly what's happening. So we can, read all these books intellectually that keep telling us how great we are, and they're wonderful. And at that moment, you're like, that's right, I'm great, right? But that's not going to last. That's a beautiful high to be on. It's a nice vibe. But what happens is eventually you will get triggered because you still have frozen trauma.
Yeah.
So people said they have healed reading my book because they tapping into, I'm waking up that inner child part that they repressed and they continue to avoid. And the way I wake it up is there's letters in the book written from the Voiceless Soul. So there's letters in the book that come from me talking from the womb, because I had a womb experience. I had a twin that died at
Wow.
birth, but I felt her body leave in the womb. And the reason I can tell you this is because when I was taking my past life regression training, when we do past lives, we take them through three separate journeys. First, we go through their childhood and their current life, because they're basically training their mind to go back in time, but we just go through a happy time. Then we go through the birth experience, and then we go through the womb experience, and then you guide them to leave that womb and go back before they entered the womb. Then they go back to another lifetime. So my instructor asked me to be the subject in front of the class during the womb experience because he heard me over talking to a friend at lunch that I was a twin. So I was like, okay. So the funny thing that came out of that story was that I felt like I was in the womb. I mean, it was incredible. And I was all new to hypnosis at the time too. I went right from learning hypnosis to past life. So this instructor got me so deep into trance that when he said go to the womb, I was suddenly like there. And he says, what's happening? And I was like, well, it's dark in here. And he says, okay, well, what are you feeling? And I said, oh my God, I got to get out of here. And he's like, you have to get out of there. What's happening? I said, I'm drowning. He says, you're drowning. Is anybody with you? I said, yes, my sister. And he said, well, what's happening with her? I said, she's in distress. And then he says, okay. He says, what happens next? And I said, forget it. He goes, forget it. I go, yeah, forget it. Now I'm angry. He's like, forget what? I go, she's gone. He says, she's gone. Where'd she go? So now, when you are in a trance, you never really give up your conscious mind completely. It's a protective mechanism where it's still there. It's just relaxed. So in my conscious mind, I'm thinking, ask. She's gone. Who am I asking? Right? But the weird thing is, when I had the thought of asking, all of a sudden, these words came out of my mouth. And I said, I was never meant to be on this physical plane. I only came here to guide you because you didn't want to come into this life. After that came out of my mouth, I was shocked. I'm like, who said that? It came out of me. I don't know who said it, but it came out of me. So that was cool. So then I was like, all right, I'm confused. So then they're like, can you tell me what mom is feeling? So I said, she's weak. She's not strong. I kept saying, she's weak. She's not strong. And they were like, okay, what do you mean she's weak? She's not strong. I said, she's weak. She's not strong. I couldn't say any other words. But my body felt like it was melting into the chair I was in, like I was sinking. I felt like I was weak, like I was dying. And I was like, oh my God, this is so bizarre. So in my ego mind, my conscious mind, which is still hanging out there, I said, oh, I must be thinking that because she put up with my dad. She's weak, she's not strong. I didn't know why I was so emphatic on that. So now after that experience, I call my mom because I remember my mom saying that my twin was born and died later. So I called her up. I said, all right, did Mary die in the womb or outside the womb? She says, no, she died outside the womb. She was born. And I said, she was born. I said, well, that's really confusing. She goes, yeah, she died an hour later. I said, okay. I said, I also felt like I was, like you were very weak. She says, yeah, I never told you this. She goes, but I went into a coma. They called the priest. All my organs shut down. So what happened was my twin was born first. They didn't know back in the day, giving away my age here, that there were twins. So I was actually born 10 minutes later and could feel my mother's body shutting down. That's why I said, I got to get out of here. I was drowning because the water broke and I was drowning in it. So now they got to take me out. Now they find out I'm in there and they take me out. But now I'm wondering if my mother's body shut down and they called in a priest, there's a lot happening now in that room, right? You're in this room of doctors, nurses, didn't know there was a twin. One of them's dying. The other one's coming out with all fluid in her lungs, which was me, and my mother's shutting down. So there's a lot of chaos. What's going on in my soul? What's going on my vibration at that moment, right? It's got to be a lot of fear because I don't know what's going on. Also, there's a lot of doctors, which are on birthpsychology.org, that say if mother's consciousness shuts down, baby's consciousness loses the connection to mother and feels abandoned.
Wow.
So not only am I feeling abandoned by my sister, but by my mom in that moment, right? So the priest is there. She's shutting down. I have no psychic connection to her. Because when you're in the womb and you're first born, until the cord is cut and maybe a little while after that, you have a psychic connection with mother. You have it before you even come into the womb, right? So I lose that psychic connection. So right there, I'm abandoned. Okay, I'm abandoned by mother. I'm abandoned by sister. I don't know what's happening. I'm in chaos. So right there, I got all kinds of fear imprints in me. But then I said to my mom, okay, you survived, but I still don't get how Mary was born. So she couldn't answer that. So now I'm really into past life regression. I'm reading all these books on it. And I read this one book that says the spirit leaves the body before the body expires. The spirit knows when the body's ready to go, and it just leaves. So what I felt was her leave, and then the body can no longer sustain life because it had no soul. So she shut down. So now I believe I actually did feel her leave. And I actually believe I picked up on mother dying, all her organs being shut down, because I was still in the womb as her body's shutting down. So that's womb trauma. So I kind of forgot about that story until I started doing past life work and taking people back, and they were expressing all kinds of womb trauma. I said, wait, this is crazy. So I started doing research at birthpsychology.org. I bought all these books about the soul of your baby, and I started reading and reading and reading. I said, this is incredible. So I talk a lot about that research in this book because it's incredible research about what's going on in the soul while you're in the womb and what you're picking up on. What are you picking up on birth? What ancestral memories are still with you? What past life memories might still be with you, right? So there is a lot we have to absorb vibrationally, okay? But also think about it. And I say in the book, we're feeling it vibrationally, but it is going to affect our nervous system. And it could cause us to have anxiety through our entire life because of our vibrational energy, because it's hitting our nervous system now, right? We have that adrenaline flow going on. So there's so many things that could be happening. That's why when I work with people, I want to know where they feel it in the body, what are the emotions behind it, and what are the thoughts that go with that? Because all of that has to come together to a higher understanding so that it can be fully integrated. If it's not integrated, it still becomes a separate part of the self. It becomes a shadow, and the whole self feels disconnected. And that is why a lot of people have addictions, because there's a disconnection to the whole self. When you're fully integrated, then you can fully tap into your divine self. But if you have a frozen trauma, that part of you is not connected to the divine self. Does that all make sense?
Wow.
Right?
I just went on a
try to
journey.
shut me up, right?
Yeah, right. Like same here. I was in like a journey when she was explaining that. It's just like, I'm like, dang, like the womb traumas, or the womb traumas for us. And you just think about that, like, wow, like during our time being inside our mother's womb, the interactions that she's having in life, the stresses that she's went through, even if there was arguments or even just emotions that she might have been feeling from experiences, we were taking that on and we didn't even know it. We just come out. And then even the birth part.
Yeah, that's
like
right.
The light.
The lights, the noise. You went from a more comfortable womb to you're freezing, right? Now you're naked in this cold room, right? And you have bright lights and there's noise, there's chaos.
Yeah. And the spank. I got spanked.
Yeah, like they spank you? Like, what is that?
Yeah. My mom told me I came out, I was just quiet. I was quiet, looking around, and then the doctor just smacked me in my butt. Then I started crying. I'm like, that's an unprocessed trauma right there, right? Welcome to the earth. Here's some trauma for you.
Right?
Yeah.
It's true, right? But that's why they say when you birth the babies in the water, it's just so much better for them. And they say that midwifery is really going to be the new way to, it's not even the new way, but it is going to be the more conventional way for birth. When people start realizing how involved this process is, how important it is to honor the incoming soul, to treat it with such delicacy and honor. And we don't do that. It's like, come on out. Smack, right? And then we start doing the Apgar test, right? We start poking at them and all of that stuff and moving their legs. We don't even give them time to just bond with mother, all right? But what if mother's unconscious? What if it was a cesarean? Now we got abandonment issues. We got rejection issues because we're not bonding with mother. Now I have a recording that I actually sent to my students that I'm teaching this work to. I said, I want you to listen to this client who's having a womb trauma, a birth trauma. And what happened with her was she, in my chair, she started going like this. And I just said, what's happening? And she said, I'm bracing for pain. And I said, where are you? She says, I don't know. There's just a bunch of other babies around. So I think she was in the nursery.
Wow.
And I said, well, what's making you embrace for pain? She says, I don't know. I'm just very tense. So something was happening to make this child tense up. And, the only thing I could get to with that was that the uncomfortable feeling of being birthed into this bright lights, because she also said the lights were bright. She was bracing for pain, all the noise, and then being pulled away from mother. So it's like, I'm a human now, I'm a soul in this body, and I don't know where I am. Nobody's holding me. Nobody's making me feel secure in this moment, right? And they're actually telling me that there are a bunch of other babies around. So they are taking acknowledgement of what's going on around them, right?
Yeah.
So what they're really doing is reliving that experience and explaining to me how they're experiencing it. It doesn't mean it's true. It doesn't mean it's fact, but it's how they're experiencing it. And however you're experiencing it is how it's going to imprint your soul, right? So growing up in life, we are going to experience fear things that feel like non-love, even though they're not, right? I had a client that was started crying like a baby in my chair. And I said, where are you? She was in her crib. And she says, no one's coming to take me. And I said, who do you need to come? She says, I need my mother. I said, where is mother? She says, I don't know, but she left me here all alone. I said, okay, and what might happen there? She says, I don't know, but I could die. And I'm like, okay. But now a child being left in the crib crying for 10 minutes could feel like eternity, like they're never coming back, because that's a long stretch for a child to be crying. All right. And they can actually start perceiving in that moment that the parent is never going to come back, because it's been so long now. They would have come back by now. Now it becomes an imprint of rejection. So, people go through life fear and rejection, which probably goes back to little innocent things like this. It's like we're born with it, So we're afraid to go on that job interview. So we push ourselves. We're afraid to enter into that relationship. We're afraid to tell somebody how we feel. Everything comes back to, but what if I get rejected? What does that say about me? But for you to even feel that way, you forgot your value, right? Because if somebody rejects you, does that mean that you're any less valuable to anybody, to the world? No. But we're never really going to grasp that if we have an energetic imprint of fear of rejection, because we're triggered now. Everything becomes a trigger. Trigger, right? When we're judging others and we're triggering them, what do we do and why are we judging others? Because we're not valuing who we are. We forgot our divinity. If we're in our full divinity, we're not judging others, right? We're not gossiping. We're not judging. So we're disconnected. There's a part of us that's disconnected from our divinity. That's the part of us that's judging, right? So we might go out into the world and be all in that divine space and do all these beautiful divine things and do a lot of volunteering and great, beautiful things for the world. And that's who we really are. We're not faking it. But then we have this energetic imprint that feels a sense of self-judgment. So we judge others, right? So again, we're projecting. And it's also people judge to try to take off their own self-judgment to make them feel better about themselves, right? So if you're a mess, I'm okay, right? You're the mess, not me,
Yeah.
right? So it always makes us feel good, right? So in order for us to really evolve out of that self-judgment, which means judging others, we have to really get in our full space of divinity. And I think the only way to really do that is to tap into those rejected parts of ourselves, our shadow self, and bring that part of us into the light, heal it, integrate it, and feel whole again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Again.
So, and that's part of the parts healing integration, the age regression work I do while they're in a trance. Like a lot of people do parts therapy when people are not in a trance state. And it also works well, but it's not going to bring up parts that are protected. You could try, and you really got to dig. But protector parts are important for us. They're really parts of us. All parts of us are doing what they can to protect us. Even the parts of us that are judging ourselves, we judge ourselves so that we don't do it again. We judge ourselves to make sure we never allow that part of us to be seen. It's a protection. And these protections, like we have parts of us that are in conflict with each other. And that's why I do parts therapy work, because I'm helping people find their inner conflict, because they're coming, say, even it comes down to smoking cigarettes. You came to me to quit smoking, but you're still smoking because a part of you doesn't want to let it go. So what I do is I do parts therapy. I don't just say you're never going to smoke again, because a part of you still wants to. So I bring up the part that wants to smoke, and we have a conversation with the part that wants to stop smoking. So in parts therapy, parts are communicating with each other. And we'll ask that part that's smoking, what does it do for you? There's a benefit there, or you wouldn't be doing it. You're getting a benefit if you're doing it. And the person might say, it keeps me from overeating. One person might say, it gives me back control, or it's the only thing I can control in my life. All right. So what we do is we negotiate now with the part that wants to quit and the part that wants to continue. And usually the part that wants to quit wins, because we're tapping into the divinity. We're tapping into the human body and saying, as long as you continue to destroy your body, where does your divinity live? You won't be here anymore. Your soul will have to move on, right? So you need to nurture this body to allow your soul to have the physical experience. If you don't nurture this body's going to give up, and your soul will not be able to have the human experience. So it's kind of like a negotiation to convince the part that wants to smoke that it's just not necessary anymore. Okay, we're bringing in divinity because you don't have to try to control things in your life. You have to have faith, and you have to have reliability and responsibility on your life, but you also have to have faith in your own divinity. So when we bring in that wisdom, that higher wisdom, only the higher wisdom can convince that lower energy part that I have to smoke, I have to control myself, I have to be in control, I have to do this for this reason. You don't have to do anything when it comes to smoking, all right? But what you're really doing is you're deciding how important these cigarettes are to you, or is the health of your body more important to your soul? So, right. If that makes sense. So no matter what they come to me with, there's always going to be inner conflict. Otherwise, you wouldn't be coming for healing. So you have a part of you that wants to heal, but a part of you that's not allowing it. So it's either going to be a trauma, or it's going to be some kind of other part of you that's giving you a benefit, and you don't even realize it. Even losing weight could be a benefit. So when I did parts therapy on a woman that couldn't lose weight, even after she tried every single diet, I brought in the part of her that wants to hold on to the weight. And that part of her said, well, if she loses weight, talking to the other part, if she loses weight, I'm going to want to leave my husband. And if I leave my husband, I have no financial stability. So that means holding on to the weight outweighs losing the weight, the benefit of it. And that's called a secondary gain issue. So there's a secondary gain. So you may want to lose the weight, and you may want to feel your best and look your best. That other part of you is saying, but if you do that, you know you're going to walk out on this guy that doesn't treat you very well. And when you do that, you have no financial stability, and you break up your family. So you're in conflict, and that's why you're not losing weight. So we heal the conflict. You have to get to that point where you decide what's in the best interest of your soul. We're bringing in your wise self. What is in the best interest for your divine self? And that is to feel free, right? So to feel free, to live like the miracle you are. You can't live like that if you're in a relationship where you're not happy, right? So you got to get into the point where you say, okay, so you won't have the money you have now, but will you be able to survive? Of course you will, because you'll figure it out, right? So you do that, and you negotiate with these parts of them so they can get to the part which is in the highest interest of not only their soul, but their human experience as well, right? So this is all done while they're in hypnosis, because everything, they answer me like this. I don't have to dig and dig and dig and try to draw it out and say, oh, come on, think about it, think about it. You must remember back when you were 2. Come on, think. No, I just want it now. That's why people are healing in 1 to 2 sessions, because they're going right to it. We're doing the deep work. We're going right to the shadow on day 1, and I'm bringing in the wise self on day 1. So they're really doing their own internal healing with me being a facilitator of that conversation, of that coming together of these 2 parts of them to bring them out of the conflict. And that's it. And as far as heart math goes, I incorporate that into it. So everything I've trained in all culminated into what I call soul level healing, which is what I teach. So I teach basic hypnosis, but my advanced courses would be age regression, parts therapy, and soul level. Soul level brings in age regression, parts therapy, and divine energy, wisdom. But it also helps people have a spiritual awakening or more spiritual awareness of their journey, because now they understand the bigger picture, because they got to really look at it without the ego interfering, without the rational mind, analytical mind taking over.
Perfect.
All right. We probably overdid our time here, so I'm looking at
And I just want to reiterate that for anyone who's interested, you can find Kelly at heartsinharmonyhypnosis.com. For those of you who are seeing this on YouTube or Facebook Live, you can see the link down at the bottom there. And Kelly, how does a person, do they just book on the website? How do they get in touch with you?
No, they can email me. I always have a phone consultation first, because I really do need to make sure it's a good fit. I cannot put just anybody in hypnosis, because if their trauma is super severe, I don't go into that with them, because it could cause repercussions later, because you're opening up a whole thing that they might not be ready for. Okay. So it depends on what they're dealing with. And also some people might say, I think I was sexually abused. People need to know that it can come up in hypnosis. It doesn't make it a fact. Okay. Because you could see something on TV and think that could happen to you, and then it becomes a belief as if it happened to you, and now it's in your unconscious, and you actually truly believe it happened to you. So I don't want people to think that if I put you in hypnosis and it comes up, that that's a fact. And people need to understand that you can fantasize while you're in hypnosis. You can make up things, or things could be false because it's coming from the unconscious. The unconscious doesn't know what's true or false. It only knows the perception. And your perception is not always 100% fact. And I do want to say, if you're interested in this book, it's on Amazon.com.
Nice. The Voiceless Soul.
The Voiceless Soul. Yeah. The feedback is great. And we're doing great with the book. And people are getting some really deep insight. And my articles are all posted. You put that up there for them. If you want to read some of my articles, it also talks about the different things I talked about today in an expanded way, in different ways, about imprints on the soul and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kelly. This was amazing.
It was a pleasure. Really appreciate the invite.
And thank you to everyone who is watching and listening.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Dell and Kaí. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, yeah.
You're welcome.
That's great.
Glad you enjoyed it.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Have an amazing week and
Good.
stay magical.
Stay